Two ales coming right up. Hello, and welcome to the BRB. Please, have a seat. You're just in time for Tavern chatter.
Honestly, you could play the same race, same class, same background, and still come to the table with a different concept every time, just based on what the story is.
With that, do you end up trying to set up the personality with the subclass, or do you try to build that in-game around the party that you have? Do you end up using your class as a springboard? Do you end up using your party as a springboard? Is that something that you come up with immediately, or is it something that you end up with later on as you get further down the road?
For me personally, as Josh, normally my characters almost always are created from personality and then into my actual character. A large part of the time when I come up with who I'm going to be or what kind of characteristics my character is going to have, that's what helps me influence the character's class, race, and background. I don't like coming up with something on the fly. Normally I have to sit on a character for at least a week before I feel like they're good enough to be used in a campaign.
For me, personality is side by side with race, class, anything like that, just because as I'm putting together the mechanical stats for a character, my brain has these thoughts of, oh, wouldn't it be funny if they were a smuggler, or wouldn't it be funny if they absolutely despised killing people but were really good at it, sort of thing, where personality has nothing to do with class for me, because any class can be any personality and still work just fine.
I agree with that, and just to kind of even go further into it, when I create the personality stuff, I do like to let what I'm putting into it, the race, the class, and everything, influence that personality even more. One concept, just as an example, that has always interested me a lot, if you read up on Tabaxi, they have this mindset where they don't value money. They don't value, they're not looking for treasure. They have this whole community of storytelling. So they're more in adventuring to gain stories. So it's very easy to play a very chaotic character with that race, because their racial traits kind of fit into that personality, if that's something that you were trying to build. But I like using a lot of lore from characters, classes, things like that to influence personality.
So then you almost end up starting with the class concept in the background, and you form the full personality based on that.
Usually the personality does come first, a little bit, and I find what fits it the best. But then as I'm going, I let it be influenced by what I'm creating.
See, and what I like to do is I like to start with just I come up with 2 or 3 different personality traits, and then as time goes on, I will then fully flesh out the character as time progresses. Okay, well, how would this character feel about, having a party member that's smuggling? How they feel about, that's fine, that you can leave somebody behind, but you have a very rough idea as to how the character, a couple of traits about the character.
Kind of building off of what Josh said, how do you feel about making characters whose personalities don't line up with their race, or sometimes even directly oppose them? So orcs are supposed to be mostly evil, but you have a true, a good, lawful good orc, or someone like the Tabaxi, who normally doesn't care about money, normally is just in it for the stories, who does care about the money and the fame and the glory and wants that personally. how do you feel about making that type of character?
I honestly feel like that's so important in Dungeons and Dragons. Breaking kind of like the status quo when creating characters is so huge. And I feel like when I first started out Dungeons and Dragons, I didn't have a good grasp of that. Like, I was very much like the original, crew of people or PCs made it. They had to be like the basic adventurers. It wasn't until I started interacting with people who created more chaotic characters at my table that kind of influenced that a huge part for me. Like, I've seen some of the crazier ones of like people playing tieflings born of demonic pacts that have this dark path opened up to them, and instead choosing to be this caretaker. Even when they're playing a class and a background that could influence them to being this darker character, they chose to be, kind of nurturing and caretaking and adventure, definitely curious towards like those evil areas, but that wasn't what drove the story for them. I've also seen people play, monster races that you wouldn't expect to be the noble hero of their group, but ended up being the guy who would sacrifice themselves or, take the hit even though they were playing a class that was so squishy. They shouldn't have been up there in combat.
I had more health than the paladin.
Beck. Not on recording, but... but yeah, no, it's...
Targeted.
I wasn't calling you out on recording. But yes, I feel like those are the best types of characters, in my opinion. Would I play them personally? Probably not, but that's because I like to stick to the storybook idea in my mind, but that's how I run my characters. I love to see other people do it, though.
Wasn't Brenna kind of that, though? Like the subversion of the Shadarkai? So, Brenna was a Shadarkai who was very in touch with emotions where they're supposed to be emotionless. That is a subversion of that sort of lore snippet about them. So you have played at least one.
That is fair. And that is kind of one of those types of character decisions that I do agree with, yes. You can take the lore-based character. For anybody that doesn't know, a Shadarkai is a type of elf that is raised in the Shadowfell. They ended up following the Raven Queen. It's kind of a huge core concept for them, but because they live in such this dark, dreary emptiness, they are born to a life of almost absolutely no emotion. So the idea of playing one of those that are just over the top emotional, anger, happiness, sadness, that's a good way to catch me in my own kind of mindset. I did create that character, and it's just proof that it's good to do those types of characters. It's good to try to break those boundaries. Think outside the box when creating your personalities.
When it comes to actually deciding how characters work, I lean more towards they will decide how they feel on it when they come to that. So, and it plays off of other people in the group. Like, playing a very grumpy character like I am currently is because most of the group was all the way up here in the extremely happy portion of it. So I kind of had fun playing against that and making decisions. Like, I made that character originally to be like a fairly happy-go-lucky little dude. But then it just sort of morphed into like, no, it makes more sense if he's kind of grumpy about everything. And I think playing that out works better for me than if I plan it 4 years in advance.
I almost agree with that, but almost in the aspect of when the campaign starts, I always like to choose someone, not Josh, just choose someone to go against personality-wise, whether it's just opposite on personality or it is a way that the character angers the other.
So, example, if one was an aggressive, fight everything, you'd want to play a pacifist.
Oh, certainly.
Or
that would
if
be
one
fun.
of them is incredibly intelligent, you would play a dimwit.
Uh-huh. Well,
Or if one of them played like a darker, more edgy character, you played the hero, Galleon.
Yeah, that doesn't happen during character creation. However, the personality, I would almost focus towards the opposite person just to see how far the character goes.
Just to try to get some dynamics in the party.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
I mean, narratively speaking, it's important to have a conflict of some kind, whether that's, friendly or aggressive. But I also feel like it's really important to be flexible with your character, and the character you start with on day one is not always going to be the character you finish with, and it's important to let them go through those changes because of stuff like that. If everyone shows up, extremely happy, it's a good vibe to start with, but it could get annoying later on, especially trying to keep it up through the stuff that happens.
As things progress, you're willing to let your character develop.
Your character has to develop as the story does.
Hearing you guys kind of talk about like playing an open book at the beginning and just kind of finding like what personality needs to be filled is so interesting to me that I think if I get the chance to jump into another game, I might come to the sessions ready to do that. I think that's so fun to think about. Just where's everybody else sit in the party, and then you find your spot. I love that.
Just trying to find your niche, and from finding the niche, from finding your role, building off of that, and not necessarily coming with it ahead of time.
All right, it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. If you like what you see, like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon to stay up to date. If you want to see more of us, check out the links to our social media in the description below. If you have any suggestions about our next video, please leave a comment as well.